Hey everybody, so today we're going to talk about why Americans are misfits when retiring abroad, especially in developing countries. Beautiful weather. A quick clarification. We are not saying all Americans are misfits. And we're not saying Americans are misfits as a person. In other words, their personal character. It's used as a description, not as an insult. Okay. I'm not talking about tourism, although there is a degree of misfit in the tourism too, because when you're always comparing to back home and what things cost, you don't really know what you're not comparing apples and apples. So, so there's a degree of misalignment there also. But not quite as much as those that want to find a permanent home abroad. There's a massive amount of adjusting that has to go into that. But let me tell you why, and it's a major reason why this happens. And also, this is not an anecdotal video. We're not going on just our personal experience. If you're new to the channel, we have an ongoing, almost decade-long presence on the internet in this space. We don't stop there. We also interact with expats on an ongoing, regular basis. And we have for years, ever since we started doing it and helping them find homes and rentals and that kind of thing in the past. So I'm keeping up to date all the time because I'm talking to them. I just talked to somebody, and once again, an expat from USA, and once again I get reminded that there's clearly a cultural misfit, and it's a very specific set of particulars that I'm talking about. So I'm not talking about what you're used to reading about on forums. I'm talking about something that's very, very it's like the bone marrow of the idea. I smell frittata or something. Frittata's not Mexican, hon. We made a video called The Gringo's Biggest Mistake, but Not You. I would say the biggest mistake that gringos make is to decide by going on some gringo portals or forums or Facebook how much they're going to spend before they even get here. Besides what has been said in that video, to add to that video is that the issue stems from a cultural attitude. And the cultural attitude, it has to do with Americans' attitude with how they spend their money, but in relation to how they go retire abroad and how they spend their money. And this subject could easily make, a dozen videos, but I just want to stay focused on the cultural attitude and how it relates to retiring abroad and how Americans interact with people because of how they spend money. If I was to sum it up in one sentence, it'd be like this. This would be the American talking. I'm okay with spending $200, $300, $400 more per month. I'm not going to go local, and I don't want to spend my time trying because I can afford it. The underlying thing that exists with this kind of a cultural attitude is not only that it's at complete odds with the way the average South and Central American or developing country citizen spends money. It's at complete odds with that. And on top of that, because of all of the things we talked about in a different video about how you are perceived. So what you're saying is that you are going to disregard something, and therefore the consequences of it being how you are perceived is also disregarded. And this comes mostly from those that haven't really made a permanent commitment yet to living abroad, and specifically in a developing country. because you see a lot of this from first timers. And when I say things like, well, you know, a lot of people read the mainstream retire abroad press and they cater to inexperienced travelers. People start feeling like sooner or later a square peg in a round hole. Okay? But the underlying issue with this scenario is that there's a fear factor that, of course, when you're talking to people, you really kind of have to pull it out of them, or they won't just tell you, you know, that there's a fear factor. You know, we've said this in articles, there's a confusion going on in the retire abroad, live abroad community. They say they want to move abroad permanently or retire abroad, that's what that would be, but then they act like a tourist. Okay? What's really going on there when people say they're relocating? I mean, if you're relocating from, say, Wisconsin to Florida or the Mexican Gulf area, it's very touristy, you know, and there's a lot of small towns around there that aren't as touristy. So the idea is that people, they might move to Florida and when they first get there, do all the touristy things. But once you live there permanently, you wouldn't keep acting like a tourist, would you? Because you're just moving from one state to the other. If you move from Michigan to Nashville, Tennessee, right, you might at first be really excited about all the touristy things. But again, after a year, 2 years, whatever, it just becomes part of the landscape, right? My point being is that when you move abroad, and this may be a result of the attitudes that are cultivated by inexperienced retire abroad, move abroad community, is that it fosters a kind of idyllic, you know, paradise, and therefore we would call it the rose-colored glasses syndrome. And because of that, people tend to not understand what they're doing. And the underlying thing is that fear factor. Okay? Why would you move somewhere that you're so uncomfortable that you have to confine yourself to being around other tourists? Is that really sustainable? The decision is not rational to pay 2 to 3 times as much, even if you can afford it. It's not rational. There's an underlying issue going on that's not normally addressed. And I'm going to call it out, and I'm going to say it's fear. Fear. That's what it is. That's what it really is. And I understand all the reasons. You can talk about this in the comments, but it just goes right in with not really moving abroad, retiring abroad to be part of the culture. So there's a certain segment within this group that will not do that and doesn't want to do that. They're going abroad, but they're gonna stick around. They're compatriots, people they can speak English, and in so doing, they create a completely separate culture and economy within a culture and economy. Okay? And so, of course, what that does is to those of us that want to go abroad and just blend in and be like part of the culture, you know, it just makes it a lot more difficult because of the foreigner profiling and cultural profiling. And so, but I think that when you're talking about making a distinction between moving somewhere permanently and just visiting and being a tourist, there has to be a clear line drawn in the sand. You've got to say, well, I'm just going to go visit, you know, just going to spend a few months, whatever, check it out. That's different. But it isn't going to give you the view you need in order to make the decision. It never will. It wasn't designed to. Tourism is designed, it's by design very superficial. It's very superficial because it's understood you're just there for a very short time. Everything about tourism is the complete opposite of retire abroad and move abroad permanently. If we can have a rational conversation, you will agree that yes, it's a completely different animal, because it isn't rational to behave in touristic ways when you know, move somewhere permanently. So, I mean, you don't do it at home. So the question you're probably asking yourself is, why not? Why not? If I can afford it, why not just go move permanently abroad and become a permanent fixture in the tourist area? Why not? You know, and is it sustainable? And as we've been outlining on our channel, it isn't sustainable because for so many reasons. I mean, there's always somebody with more money than you. That's one of the things. And the other thing you have to contend with is not just the regular compounding effect of inflation that is already there, but on top of that, you have to deal with the sped up, the rapid increase of prices that are created by the intentional RAM, Retire Abroad Media and Magazine created the intentional bubbles that they create around the world. You know, so you have the regular inflation, and then you have the inorganic, you know, synthetic inflation, which goes much, much higher and much, much quicker than even the higher inherent inflation of developing countries. Yeah, if you want to be a tourist, be a tourist. You know, let this video be clear. You should not be confused between moving permanently abroad, retiring abroad, and being a tourist. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and have a wonderful day.